Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Giribaradhari Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Krishna is the lover of Radha. He displays many amorous pastimes in the groves of Vrindavan. He is the lover of the cowherd maidens of Vraja, the holder of the great hill named Govardhan, the beloved son of Mother Yasoda, the delighter of the inhabitants of Vrindavan, Vraja, and he wanders in the forests along the banks of the river Jamuna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. What number verse is it? 20. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 4, Vidura approaches Maitreya. Text number 20. Sa evam aradita padatirtam adhita tattva atma Vibodha Marga Pranamya Padau Pavritya Devam Iha. In this place. Oh, I shouldn't do that yet. Agataha Aham Viraha Atura Atma Saevam aradita padatirtat Saevam aradita padatirtat Adita tatvatma vibodhamagaha Adhita tatvatma vibodhamagaha Pranamya padau pavritya devam Pranamya padau parivritya devam Ihagatoham virahaturatma Ihagatoham virahaturatma. Sorry. Ihagatoham virahaturatma. Pass me my bag. Well, ladies. So myself, evam, thus, aradita, worshipped, padatirtat, from the personality of Godhead, adita, studied, tattva atma, self-knowledge, vibodha, understanding, margaha, path, pranamya, after saluting, padao, at his lotus feet, parivritya, after circumambulating, devam, the Lord, iha, at this place, agataha, reached, aham, I, viraha, separation, atura atma, aggrieved in self. Translation: I have studied the path of understanding self-knowledge from my spiritual master, the personality of Godhead, and thus, after circumambulating him, I have come to this place, very much aggrieved due to separation. I have studied the path of understanding self-knowledge from my spiritual master, the personality of Godhead, and thus, after circumambulating him, I have come to this place, very much aggrieved due to separation. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sri Uddhava's actual life is the direct symbol of the Chatur Sloki Bhagavatam enunciated first to Brahmaji by the personality of Godhead. These 4 very great and important verses from Srimad Bhagavatam are particularly taken out by the Mayavadi speculators, who construe a different purport to suit their impersonal view of monism. Here is the proper answer to such unauthorized speculators. The verses of Srimad Bhagavatam are purely theistic science, understandable by the postgraduate students of Bhagavad Gita. The authorized dry speculators are offenders at the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, because they distort the purports of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam to mislead the public and prepare a direct path to the hell known as Andata Mishra. Wow. Wow. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 16:20, such envious speculators are without knowledge and are surely condemned life after life. They unnecessarily take shelter of Sripad Sankaracharya, but he was not so drastic as to commit an offense at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. According to Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sripad Sankaracharya preached the Mayavadi philosophy for a particular purpose. Such a philosophy was necessary to defeat the Buddhist philosophy of the non-existence of the spirit soul, but it was never meant for perpetual acceptance. It was an emergency. Thus Lord Krishna was accepted by Sankaracharya as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his commentation on Bhagavad Gita. Since he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, he did not dare write any commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam because that would have been a direct offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. But later, speculators in the name of Mayavad philosophy, unnecessarily make their commentary on the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam without any bona fide intent. The monistic dry speculators have no business in the Srimad Bhagavatam because this particular Vedic literature is forbidden for them by the great author himself. Srila Vyasadeva has definitely forbidden persons engaged in religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and finally salvation from trying to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, which is not meant for them. Srimad Bhagavatam 112. Dhamma projita kaitavotra is the beginning of that verse. Dhamma projita kaitavotra. Completely rejecting all materially motivated religious practices. This Srimad Bhagavatam propounds the highest truth. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Okay, Sridhar Swami, the great commentator on Srimad Bhagavatam, has definitely forbidden the Salvationists or Monists to deal in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is not for them. Yet, such unauthorized persons perversely try to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, and thus they commit offenses at the feet of the Lord, which even Sripad Sankaracharya dared not do. Thus they prepare for the continuation of miserable life. It should be particularly noted herein that Uddhava studied the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam directly from the Lord, who spoke them first to Brahmaji, and this time the Lord explained more confidentially the self-knowledge mentioned in the Paramam Stitim. I'll read that again. It should be particularly noted herein that Uddhava studied the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam directly from the Lord, who spoke them first to Brahmaji, and this time the Lord explained more confidentially the self-knowledge mentioned in the Paramam Stitim. Upon hearing such self-knowledge of love, Uddhava felt very much aggrieved by feelings of separation from the Lord. Unless one is awakened to the stage of Uddhava, everlastingly feeling the separation of the Lord in transcendental love, as exhibited by Lord Chaitanya also, one cannot understand the real import of the 4 essential verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. One should not indulge in the unauthorized act of twisting the meaning and thereby putting himself on the dangerous path of offense. Sa evam aradita paratirtad adita tatvatma vibodamaga pranamya padau parivritya devam ihagatoham virahaturatma. I have studied the path of understanding self-knowledge from my spiritual master, the personality of Godhead, and thus, after circumambulating him, I have come to this place, very much aggrieved, due to separation. Umagyanathi mirandasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshurun militam jena tasmai shri guruve namaha mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayati girim jatkripa tamaham vande shri gurun dinataranam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarane Vanchakalpa Trubhyas Cha Kripa Sindho Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Well, we're in deep water here. The Srimad Bhagavatam propounds the highest truth. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. It is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva in his maturity. It is in his maturity. Actually, this is the last compilation made by Vyasadeva. He compiled the Vedas, which contain all the Upanishads, and then there's the Brahmans and the Itihasyas and the Mahabharata and so on and so forth. We come across all of this in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, where having compiled all of these things, including 17 Puranas and so many Upa-Puranas and so many literatures, he's very dissatisfied. He's very disgruntled. And at that point we see his spiritual master Narad Muni appears on the scene. And he says, you've got it all together, but you haven't dealt with our brand. You actually haven't put the proper brand on all this literature. You haven't actually mentioned Krishna. You actually haven't mentioned what it is all about, what all this literature is for. Savasya chaham vidi shani vishto mata smiti jnanam apohanacham aham eva vejava. What is it? Aham. Say that again. Vedeshu se. I've forgotten the whole second half of the verse. Go on. Take your mask off and tell us. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta and the knower of the Veda. The actual purpose of all literature which comes under the heading of Veda is to know Krishna. No other purpose. No other purpose. That's very important to understand, and that's the point that Narad Muni is making to Vyas. You have not dealt with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You've described the setting in great detail, but you haven't put the main jewel in there. You haven't put the main jewel for which the whole setting exists. And that is what led to the recitation or the compilation of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is what we have here. And it's very clear, as it says here in the purport, this sentence. Srila Vyasadeva has definitely forbidden persons engaged in religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and finally salvation from trying to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, which is not meant for them. And then that Prabhupada repeats that later, a few sentences later. It is not for them. It is not for them. It is not for anyone other than those persons who, first of all, have become completely exhausted with all of this material business, which is enshrined within Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, or Adharma, Anatta. It doesn't matter whether you follow Dharma or you go against Dharma. The against Dharma only has a meaning because that is what it is. It is against Dharma, but it is adharma. So dharmic activity or adharmic activity. Artha, material economic development by following Dharma, or material economic development by following adharmic principles. It's all the same. It's all about material attraction and material attachment, and it is all binding into the material world. And then, of course, what are we in the material world for? We're in the material world for sense gratification, whether it is dharmic or adharmic. It doesn't matter. It's all to do with how we are wanting to gratify our senses. And the whole process is ultimately a process of frustration, because, as I said last week, oil and water don't mix. So eventually then a person wants out of all of this. I want liberation from all of this. But that's a very tricky point when you come to that. As Prabhupada says, this impersonalist philosophy, this Mayavad philosophy, is the last snare of Maya. The last snare of Maya. And if you come to that point where you want out of Dharma, Artha, and Karma, where you want out of all of that, you're actually in a very, very, very tricky situation, because you come to this fork in the road. Is the absolute personal, or is the absolute impersonal? There's a huge chapter, I think chapter 87, is it, of Krishna book? Prayers by the personified Vedas. Very long. I think it's by far the longest chapter in the whole of the Krishna book. And Prabhupada begins by explaining the question here is the absolute truth, is the source of everything personal or impersonal? And the difficulty is, as is explained here, in terms of the historical period that we are in, Shankaracharya came and propounded this impersonalist Mayavad philosophy, but as Prabhupada says, it was due to a particular emergency in the world, because the Voidist philosophy of Buddhism had become predominant. And as Prabhupada says, Mayavad philosophy is covered Buddhism. It's Buddhism, but it's Buddhism based upon the idea that there is a soul, there is a living entity, there is not just void beyond everything, there is Brahman. There is Brahman. And then the meaning of that is screwed out. Tat Tvamasi, I am that. I am Brahman. I am Brahman. You are Brahman, I am Brahman. I am you and you are me, and we are all together. This is, but it brought people back to the dharmic line, following the Vedic injunctions properly. But here we see Srimad Bhagavatam sits above everything. Because Srimad Bhagavatam, as the Bhagavatam explains, is actually an incarnation of the Lord. This Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of Krishna. It's not anything other than that. And if you try to explain it away as something other than that, well, it's personal. That's a personal offense to the Lord. That is a total disrespect of the Lord. It's a denial of the Lord. The whole problem with impersonalist philosophy is that it is a denial of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And actually it is a very, very envious philosophy. And it is envious even to the level of being envious of one's own self. Because we are part and parcel of Krishna, the Supreme Absolute Truth. We are part and parcel of the Absolute Truth. We exist. But basically, impersonalist philosophy comes to the conclusion, I don't exist. So then you can see very clearly that's a ridiculous philosophy. And the natural response to all of that is, if you don't exist, then shut up. Why are you even speaking? Because ultimately, none of this exists. Nothing exists. There is no personality. There is no me. There is no me. There is no you. I am you and you are me. And we are all together. And it's ultimately nothing. No thing. And then you get, and this philosophy pervades everything now. Mathematics and science especially. I read an article the other day about, is there anything beyond the universe? And they run into the same problem there. Because, well, is there such a thing as nothing? And the fact of the matter is, there is no thing. There is no such thing as no thing. Because even the idea of it, impersonalism, is a form. It's a form of thinking. And it's logically there in the language. You can't say that something comes from nothing. Because if there is no thing, how can there be something? There's no thing. But we see, in reality, there is nowhere. There is nowhere you go where there is nothing. Because you're there. There was this Kerry Packer, his son Jamie Packer just built this huge casino down the road here. Kerry Packer was an atheist, famous atheist, and he had a near-death experience one time. He was playing polo and his heart went into atrial fibrillation, and they barely saved him from it. And he had a near, and he was the owner of Channel 9. This is way back in the 60s, 70s, I think, early 70s, late 60s. Because I saw an interview with him after he had recovered. There was a late night, show that they brought him on, and interviewed him, and they said, we understand you went to the other side, Kerry. You went to the other side, you had a near-death experience, and you came back, and he said, oh, yeah, yes. And I can tell you, there's nothing there. Well, you were there, Kerry, to come back and tell us there's nothing there. There is no nothing. And even to think that there is nothing proves the fact that there's no nothing, because you're thinking that there's nothing. You are there thinking it. But the difficulty is a poor fund of knowledge. a poor fund of knowledge. And the source of the poverty of a poor fund of knowledge is forgetfulness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A forgetfulness of the absolute truth. The absolute truth. And actually, to be ready for Srimad Bhagavatam, you have to be fed up with all this gobbledygook, all this speculation about what is the nature of reality, what is the source of everything, how can we imagine something to be. Another article I read just recently about some archaeology that's going on in South Australia that proves that something about the Aboriginal people dating back thousands of years, and it's just a few shells that they found somewhere, but on the basis of it they're speculating. And this scientist who was interviewed, archaeologist, said yes, on the basis of these artifacts we can begin to imagine what life was like then. How can you imagine what life was like? You can imagine, but does that mean what you imagine is what it was like? I can imagine one thing, you can imagine another, based on the same evidence. And this is the nature of this process of Muniism, speculating about what is what. And one has to become fed up with this. One has to become fed up and realize this is actually getting me nowhere, because I'm not satisfied. Ahoitaki apratihata yayat ma suprasidati, Sutta says. The first thing he says in response to the 6 questions that the sages at Naimisharanya asked is that the Supreme Dharma, the Param Dharma, which stands above all of this Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha business, the Supreme Dharma is Bhakti Yoga, devotional service to the Supreme Lord who exists beyond the realm of sense perception. It's very interesting that in that verse there are so many names of the Lord that he could use, but he uses the name Adhoksaja, who exists beyond the realm of sense perception. And all of this philosophical speculation all exists within the realm of sense perception. And another meaning of Adhoksaja, Prabhupada gives a very brilliant explanation. He said it is A and Ksha. A is the beginning of Sanskrit, and Ksha is the end of Sanskrit. And Adhoksaja means that which cannot be described within the purview of language. And you just look at language, how many words there are. And it's endless, from one language to another. But even we look here within English, every year they list new words. What to speak of? You pick up some kind of catalogue of medical names of medicine. They're concocting words all the time. Bisoprolol, spirulactin, entresto, all these kind of names. They're all words, and they're all through the combination of letters. But no matter what combinations of letters you come up with, you're not going to concoct or come up with a description of the Lord unless and until you have that vision of the Lord and you describe what you see. So there we see. After Narad leaves, Vyas goes into a meditation. He goes into a deep meditation. And in his meditation, he sees the Lord. And he sees the material energy behind the Lord. The difficulty is, as I explained last week, we're on this side of the curtain. The Lord's behind the material energy, and here we are, trapped within the material energy, trapped within the realm of sense perception. And there is no satisfaction in that. Because no matter what dharma you perform, or what ardharmic activity you get yourself engaged in, there param dharma exists beyond. And therefore Krishna says to Arjuna, Naham prakasha savasya yogamaya samavrita mudo yam namijanati loko yamajam avyayam. I am never revealed to the foolish and unintelligent. And who are they? Avajananti mamura manushuntanam ashram. In their minds they think, I have assumed this form and personality. I am something, there is something beyond me which is manifesting as me. But there is nothing beyond Krishna. Krishna is the final word in the absolute truth. But that is only revealed to a devotee. You cannot, Naham prakasha savasya. First of all, Krishna says, Naham prakasha savasya yogamaya. I am covered by yogamaya. So we're at a double disadvantage. Where Krishna is covered by yogamaya and we are covered by mahamaya. So you see a situation arising like in the Mahabharata. There's the description of how at one point Duryodhana decided just before the battle of Kurukshetra, he said, the best thing to do is we've got to get Krishna out of the formula here. We got to take Krishna out. So let's arrest him. So they invited Krishna to a. So this, first of all, he's in total maya. He's in total illusion. He's totally under the influence of the external energy because he thinks Krishna is an ordinary man. And Krishna's appearing before him so many times and he doesn't see it. Because also Krishna is covered by yogamaya and he does just appear to be like an ordinary person to somebody who wants to see him that way. But the devotees don't see him that way. The devotees see him completely differently because the curtain is raised. Both curtains are raised. Anyway, Duryodhana invites Krishna to this gathering and he tries to arrest him right there. And Krishna just immediately gives a partial manifestation of the universal form. And everybody's like, oh. This is, as Krishna says to Arjuna, this is Guyatama. This is the most confidential knowledge. What is the most confidential knowledge? The most confidential knowledge is that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Ishvara Parama. The Savakarana Karana. The Supreme Controller of everything. The source of everything. And it's a very interesting point that when Krishna starts what is called the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Itangte tu guyatamam prakshami anasuyave. I am now going to reveal to you this most confidential knowledge because you are never envious of me. The root cause of all our entanglement in this material world is our envy of Krishna. This is a very challenging thing on the path of devotional service because we've become attracted to Krishna by Krishna's mercy, by Krishna's grace. He is manifesting himself to us and we are attracted. Yes, confirmed. We are attracted. But then along the way, one has to recognize, actually, I'm actually envious of Krishna. Because immediately after Naham Prakasha Savasha Yoga Maya Samavrita Mudo Yam Nabijanati Loko Yam Jam Avyayam, he says Ichcha Dvesha Samuttena Dvandva Mohina Bharata Samoham Savabhutani Sagayanti Parantapa, that all living beings are born into delusion, overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. I remember the first time I heard in a lecture Prabhupada say this, it just chilled me. He said, the original desire is to be Krishna. The original hatred is of Krishna. Very challenging. Very challenging. But here we see, Prabhupada uses this beautiful phrase here. It should be particularly noted herein that Uddhava studied the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam directly from the Lord, who spoke them first to Brahmaji. And this time the Lord explained more confidentially the self-knowledge mentioned in the Paramam Sthiti. Upon learning such self-knowledge of love, Uddhava felt very much aggrieved by feelings of separation from the Lord. Unless one is awakened to the stage of Uddhava, everlastingly feeling the separation of the Lord in transcendental love, as exhibited by Lord Chaitanya also, one cannot understand the real purport of the 4 essential verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. One should not indulge in the unauthorized act of twisting the meaning and thereby putting himself on the dangerous path of offense. What is the root of all of this? Envy of Krishna. We cannot hold on to any envy of Krishna. It has to be relinquished. Let it go. Give it up. Prabhupada explains that. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta also. Actually, Prabhupada quotes Srila Bhaktisiddhanta explaining that. You can dovetail your lust, you can dovetail your greed, you can dovetail your anger, you can dovetail so many emotions into serving Krishna. But you cannot dovetail your envy of Krishna into your love of Krishna or your service of Krishna. That is as Prabhupada says, that is the milk touched by the lips of the serpent. The serpent is envious. Have you ever confronted a snake? Have you ever confronted an aroused cobra? I was walking one time between, in those days it was open paddocks. There was no Gurukul. This is 1975. There was no Gurukul building. There was no MVT trust. There was none of those buildings all the way down there, all the way to our Goshala. It was open fields. You could walk down through the fields. So I was walking down one really hot day through the fields to the Goshala. I was on my own, and I heard this rustling in the leaves, and I looked, and it was a cobra. And he saw me, and I saw him, and I looked into his eyes. And you know how you look into people's eyes and they're angry with you, or I was just horrified how angry and envious that creature was. How angry and envious. Just living in that anger and envy. And there's so many stories about in Bengal, like in Bengal in the villages, it's still very common. All the family sleeps on one big bed. They have a big platform, and the whole family sleeps there. And it's It's layered. The men sleep around the edge, and then the boys, and then the girls, and then the women, and then at the center, the women with the babies. And there are so many stories about how during the night a cobra will come and slither all the way over and bite the baby. This is envy. This is envy. And there's a section of Mahabharata where Gandhari overhears Duryodhana talking with the brothers about some mischief they want to perpetuate propitiate onto the Pandavas, and it's after so many things have gone on, and we know the stories. Bhima's fed the poison cake. They put them in the house of lac, and so on and so on. And Gandhari, she's just such a patient person. She sits there waiting all the time with her eyes blindfolded. When are they going to give this up? When are they going to stop all this? And so she, after it's over, she confronts Duryodhana, and she says, "Why are you doing this?" And he turns on her in fury and says, "Because I want to and I can." To his own mother, about his cousin brothers. I want to and I can. And we have to trace our connection to this material energy, to this material world, right back to that. Why do I want to turn away from Krishna? Because I want to and I can. And I did. So there. It's got to go. The envy has to go. Otherwise, we become entangled in all of this crazy, twisted speculation about what is what is reality, what is life, what is the purpose of life, is there a God without all this. We all come back to this, and it ultimately comes back to this conclusion. There is no God. There is only ultimately nothing. And why is that? Why will I subscribe to that? Because I will not accept that there is something, and that something is one person only, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No. Never. Anything but that. Anything but that. This is envy. This is envy. And Krishna says, I am never revealed. I am never revealed. You can stay in the material energy forever if you want to. Prabhupada said that once in a dasha in Vrindavan. There are some living entities who stay in the material world forever. So the line is drawn. The line is very simple, the line is very clear, and you either step over that line or you don't. And the fact of the matter is, we all know from our own personal experience, yayatamam prapadyante tatangstataiva bhajami aham. As they surrender unto me, as I surrender, as you surrender to Krishna, Krishna rewards accordingly. Krishna is very responsive. He responds to everything. So if you want to forget him forever, he'll respond to that. But as soon as you've crossed the line of becoming a devotee, what does devotee mean? What does devote mean? Sorry? It means from vow, from a vow. A devotee is a person who acts from a vow. That is why it is recommended, with all sincerity, you come before the Lord and you bow down to the Lord and say, my Lord, from this day on, I am yours. Now, in order to do that, you have to break a vow. Because somewhere in our distant past, we bowed down at the feet of the material energy and said, my dear Durga, from this day on, I am yours. And we've been very devoted to that for a very long time. You have to break the vow to Maya to make the vow to Krishna. And in the process of doing that, you have to recognize, what's holding me back? Why can't I do it? Why can't I do it? Why can't I really do that? Because actually, I'm envious of Krishna. I want to be Krishna. I want to be the enjoyer. I want it all to be about me. I used to do catering at a New Age program in St. James Church in Piccadilly in London. And I can't tell you how many times this same thing was repeated, where somebody would come along with some philosophy, and they would always begin by saying, you don't need a guru, you don't need to study all these old books, and you don't need a guru. And by the way, my book's available up the back after my talk. You don't need a guru. You be your own guru, and I've got a book here who'll tell you how to do it. Envy. These are all manifestations of envy. One has to be